Once upon a time in the glittering, obnoxiously perfect elven kingdom of Silveries, Princess Leora was drowning in silk gowns and royal expectations. At 127 years old, barely an adult by elf standards, she was about to be shackled to some mystery prince her father picked out like a prize hog at a fair. "Marry a stranger? I'd rather shave my ears," she muttered, flinging her tiara into a bush. So, with a quiver of arrows, her trusty bow, and a middle finger to tradition, Leora snuck out under the moonlight, craving adventure and a life where she wasn't just a royal broodmare. Her first taste of freedom came in the form of danger. A pack of goblins ambushed her on a forest trail, their greasy claws itching for elf blood. But Leora was no damsel. With the grace of a caffeinated cat, she danced through the trees. Her bow sung as arrows pinned goblin hats to trees, and occasionally their owners. One particularly dumb goblin tried to grab her braid, only to eat dirt when she flipped him into a thorn bush. "Next!" she called, already sprinting toward the next thrill. Her travels led her to the Randy Worm, a tavern that smelled like regret and cheap ale. Inside it was a circus of drunken, foul-mouthed men, humans, orcs, and one particularly handsy gnome, who saw a lone elf lass and thought, "Jackpot." "Oi, sweetheart, fancy a roll in the hay?" slurred a bearded lout, winking like he'd invented charm. Leora smirked, twirled an arrow between her fingers, and fired it into his mug, shattering it. The room went silent. Another idiot lunged, only to find himself pinned to the wall by his belt, courtesy of her bow. "Anyone else want to test my aim?" she asked sweetly. The crowd found their drinks very interesting, but one man didn't flinch, an elf, lean and stupidly handsome, with tousled silver hair and eyes that screamed trouble, swayed over with a tankard in hand. "Name's Thalion," he drawled, drunk but dripping charisma. "You shoot like a goddess, and I'm betting you're bored out of your pretty skull. Wanna team up?" He rambled about a legendary treasure hoard, stolen by a dragon who extorted kings until someone, or something, offed it. Now, the dragon's loot was ripe for the taking. Thalion's plan: snag the gold, buy land in the Outer Worlds, and build a homestead where he could grow potatoes and avoid people. Leora's ears perked. Treasure meant freedom. No more princess gigs, no forced weddings. She could live like a normal elf, maybe even find a guy who didn't make her gag. "Half the treasure, or I pin your ears to the bar," she said. Thalion grinned, ordered 2 whiskeys, and they toasted to their partnership. Several drinks later, they stumbled upstairs, giggling like idiots, and passed out in a room at the inn. Morning hit like a troll's club. Leora woke with a hangover that could kill a horse, sprawled in bed next to Thalion, who was snoring loud enough to wake the dead. "Oh, hells!" she groaned, checking for her clothes, still on, thank the gods. Thalion stirred, bleary-eyed. "Relax, princess. I was too drunk to even flirt properly. Nothing happened." Relieved, they chugged a foul hangover brew that tasted like regret, but worked miracles, then hit the road to hunt the dragon's hoard. Trouble was, they weren't alone. Word of the dragon's death had spread, and every greedy bastard from here to the misty marshes was after the treasure. Their competition included a shifty dwarf named Grimlock, who Thalion swore couldn't be trusted. Dwarves and gold are like augurs and hygiene. Bad mix. There was also a human rogue, Vex, who kept winking at Leora, and a half-orc barbarian, Crag, who just grunted and broke things. It was a race now, and the stakes were higher than Thalian's bar tab. That night, camping under the stars, Leora pressed Thalian for details. He spun the tale of the dragon, a greedy bastard named Zorathax, who'd strong-armed kingdoms for centuries, demanding tribute to not torch their cities. Recently, hunters found Zorathax's corpse in the Iron Fang Mountains, picked clean by scavengers. His lair, stuffed with gold, jewels, and probably some cursed knickknacks, was now fair game. Leora's eyes gleamed. "We get that treasure, I'm free forever," she said. Thalian raised an eyebrow, but didn't pry. The race to the mountains was a mess of ambushes and betrayals. Grimlock tried to sabotage their path with a rock slide, but Leora's agility let her vault over the debris, while Thalian tripped and cursed his way through. Vex attempted to seduce Leora with a lute and terrible poetry, only to flee when she accidentally shot an arrow through his hat. Krog, meanwhile, punched a bear that wandered too close, which was honestly impressive. After days of dodging traps, deciphering clues, scorch marks and claw scratches screamed dragon habitat. And bickering over maps, they all reached the lair at the same time. The cave's entrance was a gaping maw in the mountainside. The treasure hunters squared off, arguing over shares like kids fighting over cake. Grimlock wanted 70% because he brought the best axe. Vex claimed he deserved extra for moral support. Krog just growled. Leora, fed up, stepped forward. "We split it equally, or I start shooting where it really hurts." Thalian backed her, though he whispered, "Watch that dwarf! He'd steal your teeth if they were gold." Grudgingly, they agreed to team up to navigate the cave's dangers. Inside, the lair was a nightmare. Giant spiders skittered from the shadows, only to meet Leora's arrows and Crag's fists. Bats swarmed, but Thalian's quick sword work and Vex's thrown daggers kept them at bay. A massive centipede nearly ate Grimlock, which Leora secretly thought was calmer, but she shot it anyway. Finally, they reached the hoard, a glittering mountain of gold, gems, and tacky goblets that screamed dragon taste. Their jaws dropped. "I'm retiring," Vex whispered. Even Crag looked emotional. Then, because the universe loves a twist, a cackle echoed through the cave. A wizard, gaunt, bearded, and smug as hell, appeared, cloaked in shadows. "Thanks for clearing the way, idiots," he sneered, waving a staff that glowed like bad news. Before they could react, he cast a spell, binding them in a magical cell with a shimmering shield. They watched, helpless, as he used a transportation spell to whisk the entire horde to his magical realm. He vanished with a mocking wave. Slumped in the cell, the group wallowed in despair. "I should have stayed home," Thalian groaned. "My potatoes would have been legendary." But Leora wasn't done. "We're getting that treasure back," she said, rifling through her pockets. The others followed suit, pooling their gear. A dagger, some rope, a half-eaten sandwich, Krog's, and Leora's royal amulet, its sapphire glowing faintly. Thalian squinted. "That's no ordinary rock. It might disrupt the shield, but it could also blow us to bits. Starvation or explosion. They voted explosion." Leora jammed the sapphire into the shield's base. It hummed, sparked, and, thankfully, shattered the spell without turning them into confetti. Free, they hatched a plan: track the wizard, infiltrate his realm, and pull off the heist of the century. Vex's lock-picking skills, Grimlock's knowledge of arcane runes, Crag's brute strength, and Leora and Thalian's elven agility made them a terrifyingly competent crew. They followed the wizard's magical trail to his fortress, a gaudy tower floating in a void of swirling colors. The heist was a masterclass in chaos. Leora and Thalian snuck past wards with cat-like grace. Vex disarmed traps, and Crag punched a golem into scrap. Grimlock, to everyone's shock, didn't betray them, though he did pocket a ruby when he thought no one was looking. They found the treasure in a vault, unguarded because the wizard was too cocky to expect company. Using a stolen teleportation rune, they sent the horde to a safe spot in the Outer Worlds, then bolted before the wizard noticed. At the Outer Worlds border, the group divvied up the loot. Handshakes were exchanged, though Thalian still eyed Grimlock like he expected him to swipe his wallet. Krog grunted a goodbye. Vex blew Leora a kiss, then dodged an arrow. Grimlock muttered about opening a tavern. Thalian turned to Leora, his usual smirk softer. "Guess I'm off to build that homestead." "You in?" Their adventure had forged a bond. Late-night talks, shared danger, and that time they both fell in a river running from a troll. Leora grinned, leaned in, and they kissed, all sparks and promise. But fate's a jerk! Before Leora could say, "Let's plant potatoes," her father's hunters swooped in, all armor and royal banners. "Princess Leora, you're coming home!" they barked. Thalian's jaw dropped. "Princess?" Dragged back to Silverus, Leora was shoved into wedding prep, her heart sinking faster than a dwarf in quicksand. The gown was extravagant, the guests insufferable, and her mystery groom loomed like a prison sentence. She trudged down the aisle, refusing to look up, dreading the smug prince she'd be stuck with. At the altar, she forced herself to meet his eyes, and she nearly fell over. Thalian stood there, cleaned up but still with that roguish grin. "Surprise," he whispered. After the ceremony, he explained. He'd fled his own kingdom to dodge an arranged marriage, only to learn Leora was his betrothed. When he found out she was the princess, he realized he loved her fire, her aim, her refusal to take crap. So he tracked her down, agreed to the marriage, and planned to whisk her to the Outer Worlds for their homestead. Royal duties be damned. They sealed it with a kiss that made the crowd blush, then snuck out of the reception to start their new life. Somewhere in the Outer Worlds, a potato patch awaited, and Leora knew she'd found her adventure and her man on her own terms. The end.